Welcome to Leadership, the Secret Sauce, the podcast where we talk to extraordinary coaches and leaders to dive into the realms of leadership and coaching. We're your hosts, Dave Lipsky and Matt Dodson. So let's jump in with another guest and find out their answer to the question, what is your secret sauce? All right, welcome in. Before we begin, a quick shout out to our sponsor, Character Matters Coaching and Consulting, where they believe that your character is the compass guiding you through life's journey. Whether you're facing personal or professional challenges, they are dedicated to helping you discover and strengthen the core values that define who you are. Dave, what do we have on the podcast today?
I would like to welcome Bethany and just start off with a question on a scale from 1 to 10. What is your energy level? 1 low, 10 high.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would put it at about probably a 7. It's Friday, so I'm feeling some good weekend energy coming and excited, always excited to head into the weekend.
Yeah, I will match your 7. And Matt?
I'm at least an 8.5, Dave, because
Ooh.
Now this is the second hour we've been talking, and so and probably the second cup of coffee. So I'm ready.
Yeah. Matt is wired and ready. All right.
Yes, very much so. And I slept in this morning. I mean, come on, really.
Yeah. Oh man, what a treat.
Yeah. Right.
So Bethany, you are in a plane, train, and automobile, and somebody next to you says, "Hi, Bethany. What do you do? How do you introduce yourself?"
Yeah, I introduce myself. I'm a leadership coach. I work with leaders, helping them to develop greater leadership skills and competencies, and I do that through coaching.
That's great. And do they ever ask, like, what in the world is a leadership coach?
Yes, absolutely. All the time. So, sometimes they don't ask, right? And they're just a little bit like, okay, just move on.
Yeah.
But certainly, I think then, getting into a little bit more of the nuts and bolts of what that looks like, giving some examples.
Bethany, we're kind of really curious about your journey. Just for our audience, I found you on the web through your posts about Working Genius, which I really am a fan of, Lencioni's model for how teams work. So tell us a little bit about your own personal secret sauce.
Yeah. Well, I definitely love the Working Genius. I would say that's an assessment tool that I'm really enjoying using these days. So, but as it relates to my secret sauce, what I really wanted to focus on today is I'm very passionate about developing a coaching mindset in leaders. That my background is in higher education. I started out as an English as a second language instructor. Amazing, wonderful career that led me down a path of working in international higher education. And then through some different series of events, I landed in leadership development and coaching. And I think having an education background has really sort of framed how I approach coaching in terms of I'm always thinking as a leadership educator, what is going to help someone develop greater leadership competency? And I think having a coaching approach as a leader is one of the greatest tools for developing EQ, really EQ in action, basically. Right? When you're coaching, active listening, all of those skills, you really have to lean into your interpersonal edge. And I also think, it develops the leaders around you to think more independently. So I would say one of my secret sauces is developing leaders with a coaching mindset.
How did you discover that? Like, how did that? Okay, so you're in higher education, and then what? Like, you're just like, boom. Okay, this is it. What happened?
Yeah, I mean, even when I was in higher education, I've always had an interest in leadership development, and I took a couple of roles, back and forth where I was doing more work with leadership development. And I think my brain is just wired to think about what is happening from a leadership level. How is that trickling down to everyone else? How engaged are people, right? So I kind of have just that natural wiring to think on that level. And early in my career, I had some impactful managers who were, they were not trained coaches, right? They didn't go through ICF credentialing, but they had a very, what I would consider an informal coach approach. And I can think of two managers in particular. My first manager right out of graduate school, she she had this amazing ability to sit in the silence.
Mm.
She was really good at asking thoughtful questions, not because she was supposed to, but because she really cared about your answers. I could
Mm.
tell she cared about me, right? She was invested in me. Of course, she cared about the mission, et cetera, but she really was invested in who I was as a person. And that came out in how she interacted with me. She would take the time to sit with me, help me problem solve. And like I said, like she would ask these questions. She probably was one of the people who had more comfortability with silence. That's Silence isn't comfortable for everyone, you know. But she would ask a question and then she would just kind of sit, let you respond. And then even after you answered, she would still sit. You're kind of squirming a little bit and you're thinking, did I not answer that fully? Or but I think just her ability to get me thinking on a deeper level, it's so memorable. It shaped who I was in that early career opportunity. Um, and then similarly, I had another manager who had what I would consider a coach approach. She didn't have formal training to my knowledge, but she was very intent on knowing who I was as a person.
Mm.
She knew my strengths and weaknesses really well. So on Working Genius, my top genius is invention, and I'm I love big ideas. So, if you work with me for any time, you'll find this pattern of, hey, let's try this, or,
Mm.
what if we did this? And, I would often come to her office when I was working with her and propose some of these big ideas. And at the time, I'm sure she was thinking through, like, oh, that won't work because X, Y, or Z. As a manager, she had the whole picture in mind. And I think she could have very easily shut me down and, or, even gently said, like, that's not going to work. You need to figure out something else. But many times she instead created a space where she would just ask out of curiosity, well, why do you want to do that? And tell me where that's coming from. And
Mm.
what do you think are going to be the implications of that? And again, it just pushed me to really think through. And sometimes I, still launched ahead anyway and tried something that didn't work in the end. But then she was there to debrief and say, like, okay, what did and didn't work and what would you do differently? And, you know, to be honest, it was just such a gift to have a leader who took the time and who showed up in that way for me as an early career professional. Made such an impact that as I transitioned into coaching and more leadership development work, I knew that I wanted that to be a key theme in how I work with leaders, that I'm providing opportunities for them to think about how they're engaging with their direct reports and their teams.
Mm.
I like how you shared that. How would a client experience you holding that space for them like that?
Yeah, great question. I think certainly it depends on a client's goals, right? So if they have an express commitment to a coaching style, that would be something that we would discover early on in our coaching work. But if they do, you can be certain that I will be intentional about integrating that organically into our approach. So knowing that it's messy in practice, working out this coach approach is very messy. It can be. So I think often I will just ask a simple question, whatever we're talking about, what would it look like to have a coach approach, for example? Or where's the coaching moment right here? Is there a coachable moment that you can lean into? And what would that look like? And then I think more practically, it's just helping be a thought partner in some of the intricacies and the nuances of what it looks like to work this out in practice. Um, Balancing different roles and power dynamics and trust levels and all of those variables that are really like levers that can make or break sort of a coaching relationship in the workplace.
Mm. You describe those two managers as really caring for you as a person. I wonder, like, have you ever gone back to them and talked to them about just how I mean, I think, oftentimes we don't as supervisors or just even, going back and just acknowledging how impactful those two ladies were in your life. That just is really unique.
Yeah, yeah, certainly. I think I have at different times, but it probably is something that I can can do again because you're right. It's not everyone experiences that. And
Yeah.
coaching a lot of leaders, I hear a lot of other stories that just don't match that. And so I think you're right. It is a really special gift. I'm very grateful.
Yeah. Oftentimes in development, especially leadership development, we talk about the art of supervision versus the science, just because um, as a supervisor, you're the person that usually your direct report goes home and complains about or celebrates, right? In terms of what you said or what you did. I mean, that is such the impact. If I'm anywhere self-aware about the impact I'm having on somebody, knowing that that person that reports to me goes home and says, "You would not believe what my supervisor did," or to say it this way, "You would not believe what my supervisor did for me today," right? In a positive way.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah.
I yeah, something you said before caught my attention, Bethany. Around you were focused on English as a second language, and in that space, and I find it just a fascinating space for coaches of how what the importance of language and translation, and how does that show up for you when you're coaching?
That's a great question. I think I've in my coach training, I definitely gravitated towards the courses around um, metaphors and how we're using language in coaching, and have even realized that developing a coach approach is not that dissimilar from acquiring a different language. Even in things like when I was teaching English as a second language, I studied different conversational patterns, right? So in different cultures, we have different styles of taking turns in conversations. And when you look at maybe like an average conversation and the cadence of that and kind of the back and forth, or even if you look at like how a manager and a direct report might typically converse under a more hierarchical culture, it definitely falls into that more problem solution directive often sort of approach. Whereas when you're developing coaching skills, there's a different cadence to that conversation. And so I think just mapping that on and realizing that it is like language acquisition in the sense that we are activating different parts of our brain and learning to pause instead of speak. And there's a lot that is often happening in that pause. And learning to ask questions versus make statements can also be it's an acquisition process. So yeah, I definitely think there's a lot of interesting
Mm.
parallels between those two disciplines.
Bethany, when you're at finding a coach, what do you want from that coach?
I think, for myself, I'm an external processor. So the coaches with whom I've worked know that I need lots of space to work things out. Um, what I've found is a few really curious questions that are genuine and that give me a lot of space to do that deep critical thinking. That is really the secret sauce for me when I'm a client, right? And I think that's, that simplicity, it takes a lot of work to get there as a coach. But it's amazing how profound it can be as a client, right? Sometimes it's just one question and the space to think externally and to process that can help me get to a different mindset or a different perspective.
Mm.
Um, so I think it boils down to some of the top skills I saw in my managers were the curiosity, that genuine curiosity, kind of interwoven with I care about you as a person, right? It's like this mix of care for you holistically, and that sort of then fuels the curiosity naturally. And then I think how that is demonstrated is listening and questions, right? And how those play together. It can look a lot of different ways, but when you have been listened to and you know when someone has asked a question that pushes you, right? And that really gives you an opportunity to go deeper with your own thinking.
Love it. Yeah, that's a right on. You just ticked off two of my major things around coaching and around care and concern and curiosity. Yeah.
Yeah.
What would you recommend as far as resources? Maybe 3 books or podcasts, or somebody was really curious about a coaching mindset or just curious about the things that you like. What do you really recommend?
Yeah, this is a great question. So I teach a few graduate courses for managers, and we have, like a specific coaching modules. And so one of the resources that I always include for that course is The Coaching Habit by MBS. Um, this is, I think, a fantastic go-to resource because it breaks down some of the key things. What's the benefit of a coach approach? What's the ROI to the organization? And then the fact that you actually have to develop it as a habit in order to see those results. And then it just gives you these, like, MBS just gives you 7 brilliant questions, right? That you, I think, can integrate into your conversations. And I've had students come back to me and say, like, that book has been a game changer. It's simplicity yet sticky sort of concepts, I think, are really, really powerful.
Hmm.
And I also would then say some resources around listening and question asking. And I think Oscar Trimboli has some great resources on listening. I often refer to him. He has a website and a listening quiz and a podcast and some really great tools to just take your listening skills to the next level. Because that can make a difference just in your everyday conversations, let alone if you're trying to do a coach approach. And then I would recommend finding ways to practice what I call question thinking, where you, instead of just listening to respond and kind of going into that, whether it's advice or validation of some kind, which can be great things, but just giving yourself more exposure to what does it look like to practice responding with questions, out of curiosity. So finding question banks that you can review and look at and practice. Tony Stoltzfus has a great book that is just really easy to pick up and kind of sort through some different questions, but there are lots of other resources. And then the last thing I'd recommend, I think, just if especially for the leaders listening who want to take more of that coaching approach, or if you're integrating this into your practice as a coach, seeing coaching in action, there's nothing that can, replace that. And so there's, of course, lots of good coaching demos online, but I love the podcast. I think it's Coaching Real Leaders by Muriel Wilkins. And I think it serves a double purpose because she's often coaching leaders who have these really complex situations. So as a leader, it's really valuable to hear that. But then you also get to see the art of coaching kind of, and how she asks good questions and, serves as a thought partner to those that she's coaching. So
Nice.
yeah.
Dave, what's your reflection?
We had Muriel Wilkins in to coach somebody a few years back, and absolutely fabulous.
Yeah.
Absolutely fabulous. Bethany, you exude authentic curiosity and caring, and I just got a sense of that presence as soon as we came on and started talking. So I really appreciate how you hold that space, you reminded me that that's what we do as coaches. We create that space for our clients. It's probably the highest order thing we could do. So thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think, you know what? You also reminded me that as leaders, we do have the capacity to change someone's life for the good, or maybe for otherwise.
Right. Yeah.
But I think, oftentimes I forget that when you're having a chance to talk with somebody, and if you really have a genuine care and concern for them as a person, because you described that as your manager really caring for you as a person, that those genuine questions are come from such a place of like wanting the best for that person. It's it really can affect someone. I mean, even affect what you do for work. I think that's fascinating. I mean, you don't realize that at the time, and maybe it's something you kind of look back on, or maybe once you retire or once you're dead, or I don't know, the funeral type of experience. And that sort of reminded me like that, hey, this leadership concept of really wanting the best for somebody and asking really good questions is really is a game changer or a life changer, I would say. And that's what, yeah, it'd be really curious, like what those women ended up doing. Because they probably not just affected you, but they affected other people. And the ripple effect is obvious evident. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there is definitely, it's complex, right? There are challenges being a leader. There are so many limitations on how you can incorporate this, but just simple things often makes the biggest difference.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
mhm.
Bethany, what's the best way someone can get a hold of you? What if they were interested in your coaching or working genius stuff, or what's the best way that someone can find you?
Yeah, you can find me on the web at www.theleadershipcoachinglab.com. I have, just a different suite of resources there for both leaders and coaches, an email community, and I'm on LinkedIn as well. Yeah, I think those are probably the two best ways is through my website or through LinkedIn.
Yeah, and you do have like a newsletter that people can sign up to. I'm signed up. Just shameless plug there for you. And then
Yes, thank you. Yes,
yeah,
join the newsletter. Would
yeah,
love that
yeah.
community is.
That's right.
I love that
Now I know
community.
you
Would love you.
personally, so
Yeah.
yeah,
Yes. Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Great.
Dave,
I'm signing up.
yeah.
So
Fantastic.
absolutely right. Got one more recruit. I want to give a shout out to our sponsor. Are you feeling stuck or overwhelmed? Character Matters Coaching and Consulting provides leadership coaching and consulting to empower you to overcome obstacles and reach your full potential. Visit charactermatterscoaching.com to learn more about the transformative approach and how to get connected to Matt for your organization. Thank you so much, Bethany. This has been fabulous, getting to know you better and your approach to coaching.
Thank you both. It's been great. I appreciate the invitation and really have loved engaging with your work.
All right. And until next time, if you are going to the ICF Converge 2025, Dave and I will be there along with one of our former guests, Helen Dan, speaking on coaching culture and an imposter syndrome. So if you are interested, on the 23rd of October, we will be speaking at there, and we'd love to see you. We're going to be even at the coaching and organizations booth, asking you for what is your secret sauce. We will have a sauce wall. So we ask you come by and fill out your card and get in touch with us. We'll talk to you then. Thanks for listening. If you love this podcast, please share it with another coach or leader. Make sure you go to the show notes to get all the resources from today's episode.